This is First Coast Math Clinic with Lesson 6, Solving Application Problems with Proportions, from Unit 4, Ratios and Proportions, from our Pre-algebra and Algebra curriculum. So the goal of this video is to solve application problems using proportions. So in the last few videos, we went through writing proportions, different proportions of different difficulty levels, and worked on ratios as well. In this video, we're going to work on application problems with proportions. I want to get into just a review problem of solving proportions before we get into our application problems. So let's look at this. So we've got x over 2 equals 7 over 3. So to solve this, let's use our cross multiplication. X times 3. So we'll get 3x. Bring down the equal sign. 7 times 2. So we'll get 3x equals 14. Solve for x, so we'll divide by 3. Divide by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1 and 1. So we don't need to write in the 1. And x, we'll round this to the nearest tenth, so we'll get 4.7. So we get 4.6 repeating, which is going to round to 4.7. So 4.7 is our answer here. And like all of our proportions, we're going to be using our cross multiplication to solve this problem. All right, so let's get into some of our application problems. So our first problem says we have a survey of 200 students was conducted to determine the favorite sport among 2,500 students at East High School, and the results are listed below. So we've got our survey data here, and we have the sport listed and the total students, and we know that our total from our survey is 200 students. We want to figure out, well, from our actual number of students, how many students like baseball, basketball, football, and soccer, right? We can't ask all 2,500 students. So we took a survey of 200, and we're going to use that 200 to model the total number of students. So our first question is we want to write a proportion and estimate to the nearest tenth the number of students whose favorite sport is baseball. So we're looking at baseball, and we know that for baseball, we have 45 students. And to set up my ratio, I'm going to set up a ratio of our part to our total. Okay, so our part here is going to be that 45. So this is going to be for my survey data. So we have 45 people out of 200, because 45 people out of the 200 total said they like baseball. Now we need another ratio for our actual data, right? Well, how many actual people do we have in the school? We have an actual number of 2,500, right? So that's going to be our total. So 2,500 should be in our denominator, as our denominator is 25 is our total, and our part, all right, that's our actual, that's our unknown, so that's going to be x, all right, and this is going to be our proportion. 45 out of 200 equals x out of 2,500. So now we can cross multiply this and just solve our proportion like we would normally. X times 200, so we get 200x equals 45 times 2,500. We get 112,500. Divide by 200. Divide by 200. And we're going to get 562 to the nearest tenth, so it should be 0.5 students. So our actual number is going to be 562.5 out of the 2,500 students that like baseball. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. So the second problem, we've got the same data, same scenario. Survey of 200 students was conducted to determine the favorite sport among 2,500 students at East High School. We've got our survey data here. From the previous problem, we know that 562.5 students like baseball. So now we want to figure out how many students' favorite sport is basketball. So basketball is right here. All right, so we know our total students from our survey is 30. Our actual students we don't know, so we want to set up our ratio of part to total. So from our survey, our part is going to be that 30. Our total is going to be the 200. From our actual data, right? So our actual 2,500, right? That's our total. And our part is going to be the x, the amount that we don't know. Now 30 over 20. 30 over 20 we can cancel out, get rid of a 0 and a 0. So we basically have 3 over 20, right? So we can get rid of a 0, make our math a little bit easier. Now cross multiply. 3 times 2,500 gives us 7,500. Bring down the equal sign. X times 20 gives us 20x. Divide by 20. Divide by 20. And we'll get 375. So using our proportion, our students that like basketball should be 375 students out of the 2,500. All right, so we have the same scenario here, survey of 200 students, and we want to determine the favorite sport among 2,500 students. So now we want to figure out how many students' favorite sport is football. So football is here. All right, baseball we had 562.5. Basketball we had 375. Football, that's going to be our unknown. So that'll be x. So again, we'll set up our part to our total. So from our survey data, we can do 85 out of 200. And our actual, it's going to be x out of 2,500. So now we can cross multiply. 85 times 2,500 is going to give us 212,500. Bring down the equal sign. And we'll get 200x. Divide by 200. Divide by 200. And we'll get x equals 1,062.5. So we should get 1,062.5 students who like football. So again, we're setting up part out of total. So our part here, 85, out of our total students, 200, and then our part here, which was x, out of our total, 2,500. So let's do one more for soccer, figure out how many students like soccer. All right, in problem D, again, we have the same scenario. 200 students were surveyed. How many students out of those 200 students have a favorite sport of soccer, right? So soccer is here. So now that'll be our x. So now our part for our survey is 40 out of our total, which is 200. So for our survey, all right, again, we want part to total. We're going to have 40 out of 200. And then our actual, x out of 2,500. So 40 out of 200. Let's reduce that. And get rid of the zeros. And then 4 over 20 reduces to 1/5. So I'll make our math a little bit easier. So let's cross multiply. Cross multiply. So we get 2500 equals 5x. You can divide by 5 and divide by 5. We'll do the rest of this up here. $2,500 divided by 5 is going to give us 500. So we should get 500 students here. Okay, so we're setting up a similar ratio for each of these problems, part to total. So our part here was 40 out of our total 200. Football, it was 85 out of 200. Basketball, 30 out of 200. Baseball, 45 out of 200. And then for our actual ratio, it was our unknown, which was X at the time, out of the 2,500. So 2,500 was always our total because that was the total number of students at East High School. Okay, so we did 4 examples to fill in this table. Let's do one more example where we use proportions to solve some application problems. All right, so example 2 says a recipe calls for 2 cups of flour and 3 tablespoons of butter. How many tablespoons of butter are needed if you use 5 cups of flour? So let's look at the information that we're given. All right, we know that 2 cups of flour and 3 tablespoons of butter are going to be our starting ratio. All right, so we've got 2 cups to 3 tablespoons. And how many tablespoons of butter so that's going to be our X, that's going to be our unknown, are needed if you use 5 cups of flour. So 5 cups of flour, that's the information that we have, we're given. So we want to know, if we use 5 cups of flour, how many tablespoons of butter are we going to need? So let's use that to set up our proportion. Okay, so we've got 2 cups to 3 tablespoons. And I'm going to keep the labels in because people typically have a difficult time with the labels. So I'm going to show you exactly what's happening with the labels here. So 2 cups to 3 tablespoons. The information that we have in the second ratio is 5 cups, right? So that 5 cups should be in our numerator. So we have cups in the numerator, cups in the numerator. And then we have X tablespoons. So we'll keep the X in the denominator. So now let's solve our proportion, cross multiply. So, and just kind of bear with me as I write out this, keeping our label here. So we've got 2 cups times X equals, so bring down that equal sign. Now 5 cups times 3 tablespoons. So 5 cups times 3 tablespoons. So 2 cups times X equals, I'm just going to multiply the 5 and the 3, so we get 15 cups tablespoons. Okay, so I'm keeping all the labels here just so we can see what exactly happens to the labels now. So I want to get that X by itself. So I've got 2 cups times X equals 15 cups tablespoons. Well, let's divide by 2 cups and 2 cups. So 2 cups divided by 2 cups gives us just 1 and 1, so we're left with just X. So I'll do write this over here, right? 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. And what label cancels out here? Well, we've got cups over cups. The cups are going to cancel out, just as the 15 divided by 2 gave us 7.5. And what label are we left with in our answer? We're left with tablespoons. So we're left with 7.5 tablespoons as our answer, which is the label our answer should be in, tablespoons. So that's what's happening with our label and how we're getting the correct label tablespoons here. All right. Okay, so that was a number of examples on how to use proportions to solve application problems. I hope these videos are helping you guys. If you like these videos, leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. If you want to see any additional topics, videos for any additional topics, just leave them in the comments. First Coast Math Clinic.